All right, everybody. So, the absolute insane incel epidemic has been growing over the last year. It went from being sort of this niche section of the internet that was kind of growing in popularity back in the early 2010s to now being, honestly, I think incel ideology, like at least the core of it, is almost like the party line of the internet right now. Like, even though the internet overwhelmingly hates Andrew Tate and his, like, posse, it feels like a lot of the same ideas they preach have actually seeped out of their sphere and become popular, like, even among people that criticize Andrew Tate nonetheless. You guys have noticed that, right? And with that said, I think that it's fair to say that a lot of people are kind of worried about this. I mean, where is this coming from? Why is incel ideology getting so popular? Are they just getting louder, or are there actually more people subscribing to the ideology of inceldom? Now, I should clarify, by the way, the actual definition of incel has actually changed a lot over time. Incel just used to mean involuntarily celibate, right? Like somebody who involuntarily is celibate, as in they can't get pussy, right? They can't get laid. Obviously it can also mean you can't get dick, but typically we're talking about men identifying as incels online. Now though, incel has a much broader meaning outside of just dudes who can't get laid, and has basically become an umbrella term for the entire ideology that encompasses the MRA, red pill, pickup artists, right wing, like anti-feminist sphere, right? That's essentially what we're referring to when we say incel now. Much less than the traditional, like, 2012, 2014 dude who can't get laid online, definition of incel. That basic sort of history lesson out of the way, the incels, I do think, are getting more popular. I think their figureheads are getting more attention and getting more popular, and I think generally their ranks are growing in numbers for, sadly enough, fairly valid reasons. If we look at, the state of most, maybe not most, but many, studies done on the virginity status of a lot of young, men compared to young women, 18 to, 23 or something like that, there's definitely been a pretty sharp increase in male virginity. And that doesn't always have to be a bad thing. Obviously, if you're a virgin and you just haven't gotten around to having sex, or you don't want to, or it doesn't really bother you, or you're not into sex, or you're just not ready yet, that's completely fine. But let's not pretend that is most people. Most people, particularly most dudes, which is what we're really talking about here, really want to lose their virginity sooner than later, especially around 18 to 23, right? And we've also seen an increase, statistically speaking, of loneliness and feelings of sort of unwantedness in our society, both for men and women. All of these stats apply to men and women, but doubly so for men. Now, to be fair, a lot of this data has been heavily biased, or I shouldn't say biased, heavily affected by the pandemic. The pandemic played a large part in this. I don't think this is like the left or feminism or progressivism or like society that has been the largest factor of this trend. I think a lot of it has been COVID, but nonetheless, the trend did exist before COVID happened. COVID just made it worse, right? A lot of young men that are like 18 to 23, unlike, previous years, are not losing their virginities, and they want to. They're having a hard time getting into relationships, and they're even having a harder time forming friendships. Completely platonic, non-sexual friendships. Just making friends is getting to be harder, statistically speaking, for a lot of guys. All of these things across the board are. You could argue, I mean, if you wanted to try to derive like a very extreme conclusion from this data that has not been determined by any medical experts, you could try to argue with this data that this is an indication that men are getting more antisocial, or that our society as a whole is getting more antisocial. And I think a lot of people would agree with that, but I don't know if that's entirely, like, I don't know if you can determine that completely. I think that there's always been shut-ins and people who just kind of become antisocial and hide away from society. I just think the internet has given them a platform to be accessed and to be questioned and to be counted as a statistic more often. But, you know, it's really hard to tell. It's really hard to tell when there's so many factors playing a part. That's why I like to listen to people whose job it is to pull conclusions from data like this. Regardless, I'm not going to stunlock for too long on this. My point is that men are getting lonelier, and that loneliness is making them feel empty. And in that empty state, they're going online to search for figureheads that make them feel less empty and can offer them some sort of hope. Or maybe not even hope, maybe they've reached the state of just complete self-pity and self-hatred, and they're looking for content creators that will reinforce their self-hating worldview, because at this point all they're doing is looking for fuel for their own self-hatred. That's fairly common online. I know I partook in that quite a bit when I was a little chud, and I know a lot of the other chuds online do the same. Just like watch videos about how feminism is destroying the West just to kind of sulk about how doomed white men are or whatever. Like, it's pretty common. Regardless, a lot of these factors have played a part in incel ideology getting more popular, and because of that, I think a lot of people on the left, particularly women on the left, have gotten a little bit more, scared about what may happen if, men like this were to take power. And I think this TikTok that went viral, a few days ago, might be a good peek into what that would be like. Let's watch this. Prepare yourselves for some nuclear cringe.
All women should be drafted, but not into the military. Men are doing their end of the bargain. We know who our foreign enemies are, and our soldiers go off and tackle them quite aptly, I think. But we also know who our domestic enemies are, our domestic foes. And those are, of course, incels, involuntarily celibate men. Study after study has shown the undeniable link between being an incel and becoming a violent domestic extremist. Incels undoubtedly represent a profound and present risk to national security. To reiterate, if men are going abroad to tackle foreign enemies, women themselves must tackle domestic enemies, and therefore women must be forcefully enlisted into a sex corps. It is my honest and sincere proposal that all women, unmarried, over the age of 18, must, via lottery system, once per year, solve this threat to national security and cure incels for at least 10 minutes. 10 minutes per year. Men can go and take a bullet. You can take that for 10 minutes. It's not that much. It's actually not an insane ask, to stop terrorism, is it?
If you couldn't tell, despite the fact the way this person refers to incels in the third person, in a pretty, negative way, referring to them as likely to commit terrorism, this is still incel propaganda. It's just sort of presented in a kind of sarcastic, get back at the left way. We'll cut right through, the apparent hit you in the face absurdity of the video and try to meticulously take this apart, because to be fair, there are a good few incels online, and even people who aren't necessarily incels but just kind of dude bros, who would kind of agree with this thought process. I've heard people suggest this online before, so let's take apart this argument as if it was worth engaging with on equal ground.
All women should be drafted, but not into the military.
Okay, so for starters, the US does have a draft system in place. However, we have not had a draft in a very long time, and not only that, but pretty much every single expert agrees that another draft ever happening in American history is pretty much impossible. It's not going to happen. Not only do we have one of, correct me if I'm wrong, the most manned army in the world. Our military has the most numbers. If not, China might have more people than us, but if not, then we have more equipment. We have more guns, we have more ships, more tanks, more vehicles, more planes, more everything. Not only that, but we have the largest amount of reserve fighters in the world. for a country. So, like, that's not even counting the people who are actively in our military. Our reserves are fucking massive. So if we were to go to war and our currently serving military personnel were not enough, we've got a shit ton of people in the reserves. And then from there, like, there's just not a chance that that a draft is going to happen ever again. Why are so many men that have never been in the military so freaking torn up about the draft? Because the draft is something that has no actual physical impact on us anymore, because it's literally there's never going to be another draft. The only scenario in which there's another draft is if there's a civil war, which probably will never happen, almost certainly. Like, I'm just going to say it's never going to happen. Maybe I get proven wrong. Or a war that is so big that there would never be a draft because we would be using nukes. The only, like, foe on a national scale the U.S. could go up against that would require us to do a draft has nukes. Like, it would be like a world-ending World War III tier scenario for America to have to do another draft. And that's not even considering our allies that would also most likely be helping us in whatever conflict would require this many people. Like, there's just so many factors you have to consider. The idea of, like, the possibility that men could get drafted as this big, overwhelming weight on men in America is ridiculous. It is not an actual price that men in America in the modern age are actually paying. 23, 22-year-old men in America are not paying any price because of the draft. The men who are taking a bullet in other countries, and women who are taking bullets in other countries, because I guess this guy conveniently forgot women serve in the military too, they're doing it because they volunteered. Plain and simple.
Men are doing their end of the bargain. We know
And women. There are women in the military, and all of them volunteered.
who our foreign enemies are, and our soldiers go off and tackle them quite aptly, I think. But we also know who our domestic enemies are, our domestic foes. And those are, of course, incels, involuntarily celibate men. Study after study has shown the undeniable link between being an incel and becoming a violent domestic extremist.
So what this guy's basically doing here is trying to do like a sly DreamWorks smile, smug, like, well, the left believes that incels are such a potential danger to society. All right, I'll grant them that. Then I guess the left will have to agree that women have a responsibility to prevent these men from becoming violent extremists by having sex with them. Checkmate, feminists. Looks like women need to be forced by the state into being raped to keep men from committing terrorism. Feminism destroyed.
Incels undoubtedly represent a profound and present risk to national security.
Obviously, not even the left is arguing this, that incels are like presenting a profound risk to national security. Like, the argument is that inceldom essentially is like a culture online at this point that is sort of pulling in a bunch of young men that feel like they need to have lost their virginities a long time ago, or feel like they need to be much more sexually appealing to women, and is radicalizing them towards, you know, very chauvinistic worldviews that are not based. And sometimes it leads them to committing violence. That is true, and that is a concern, but a matter of national security? Not necessarily.
To reiterate, if men are going abroad to tackle foreign enemies,
Well, women are also going abroad to tackle foreign enemies.
women themselves
Also, the U.S. military gets called in for, like, things that happen here. Like, when something really bad happens here, the military gets called in. Because they're the most armed and heavy duty of our defense. Usually we have the cops and other first responders to come in, maybe even like SWAT, state police, and whatnot, maybe even state troopers. There's like National Guard. Thank you. That's what I was thinking of, our family. There's like different tiers, but like if something's really bad, then they'll bring in the military. It's not common, but it happens. Yeah, hurricanes and big natural disasters are an instance of this. Not the military, but the National Guard. No, the military will be brought in. depending on the scenario. If military like personnel are necessary. It's happened before. They've used military personnel and vehicles for natural disaster relief in Florida.
Must tackle domestic enemies, and therefore women must be forcefully enlisted into a sex corps. It is my honest and sincere proposal that all women, unmarried, over the age of 18...
So he's arguing that because an imaginary draft that doesn't happen for men exists, because there is no draft for men. I don't know if this guy thinks there is. When you're 18, you sign up for the draft, and you have to do that, but, like... there's no draft for men, so why would this be... Like, maybe if this is a thing that you could volunteer for, that's basically the argument the left makes for legalizing sex work and making it a, like, overseen by the government, safe, legal thing. Like, if you wanted to do that and it was, like, a voluntary thing, like, where sex workers could get, like, a steady wage... Like, escorts could get, like, a steady wage doing it under, like, the state with, like, protection from police and the government and everything, and it'd be safe and you know, basically what they did with weed. You don't buy it from your plug anymore. Now you get it from a dispensary, and you know it's a lot safer. It's a lot more reliable. You're not having to hang out with some weirdo who's, you know, going to make you sit on his couch and watch MTV for 30 minutes before he actually gives you the weed, because, you know, you got to pretend like you're friends with him, because if you're not friends with him, or he kind of thinks you're a dick, then maybe he won't sell any weed to you anymore. Like, it's a lot easier now. It's a lot better now that in places where weed has been legalized. Basically, the left unanimously agrees, overwhelmingly most lefties agree, that is what we should do with sex work. This guy's like, nah, I'm going to pretend the left doesn't believe in that idea, and instead, let's push the idea that we need to induct all women into a draft that I imagine all men are equally, you know, drafted into, I suppose, as a way of reaching true equality to prevent men from becoming incels. I don't know. This is bizarre.
Must, via lottery system, once per year, solve this threat to national security and cure incels for at least 10 minutes.
Also, do you guys really think incels are lasting 10 minutes? Like, we're talking dudes who are older here, you know, who haven't lost their virginity yet, so we're talking this is their first time, most likely. Like, 10 minutes? For these incels? I mean, I'm sure some of them could definitely go that long, but definitely not most. Like, what would it be like? One lasts like 10 seconds, and then it's like 9 minutes and 50 seconds of them just sitting there in shame. The guy's gonna come out of it like more of an incel after that. Like, ironically enough, this scenario could actually lead to radicalizing like the worst of the worst incels even further. They strangled their dick till there's no feeling. Yeah, it's true. Maybe so many of them have practiced like semen retention while jacking off so much they can actually last for hours. 9 minutes and 30 seconds to start an episode of The X-Files? I've never seen The X-Files. Why would you say those words, the vegan Raincore? None of those words are in the Bible.
10 minutes per year. Men can go and take a bullet. You can take that for 10 minutes. It's not that much. It's actually no...
Wait, he's arguing that women should have to do it 10 minutes per year. So it's like, not only is this imaginary draft he wants to do, like, worse than the proper draft because you're forcing people into being raped by the state, but it's even worse in that, like, when you get drafted by the U.S. military, you get drafted once because there's a war, and that's, like, generally it. Back in the day. Here, it's like you got to do it once every year. You got to get raped by orders of the state. God damn. If it's not clear, these guys really hate women.
Not insane ask, to stop terrorism, is it?
The funny thing is, too, I think this guy's actually gay. I saw comments below this post saying that he's like a right-wing conservative gay dude on TikTok. Like, that's his shtick. That's his, like, grift thing. So I think he's literally like a right-wing gay dude making content for straight incels. So that's an unfortunate life situation, if I were to say so myself. Is that a fake British accent? Yeah, that was a fake British accent. That individual was very clearly American and faking some kind of attempt at what, like, the fake intellectual sounding British accent. You guys know the one? Yeah. Well, that was awful. I really don't have much else to say about that, but the incels are wiling out.